Yep, and here we go. Wolverine's in and Empire, Jeff and Chrome, and I just got noticing the songs I tend to be humming, singing, whatever, as streams start really give away just how freaking old I am. It's depressing to me. And Pyromaniac and CC Gaming and Lord Japos and Cody Archie and Drew Dog and Carmzilla and Roblox and Josh and Techno and Mo. Listen, guys, I just thought this would be a fun time to have a fun time. No, bad choice of words. A good time to have a stream about, regarding the same topics I brought up earlier and what exactly are the machinations involved in Putin actually carrying out a nuclear strike. Chrome says, so before we get to the gloom and doom, Dragon Ball Superhero just got a new trailer and some posters. Want me to send you them? A new trailer and some posters. Sure, you can send them along if you want. Sure. Well, we can make it fun. Yeah, Chrome. Yeah, exactly. CC Gaming says, Curtis, a fun time. I mean, for Mr. Lord Popo, it might be a fun time. Yeah, I just, and again, I know we're going away from topic for a minute. We'll get right back on it. I just got to, because I'm a few episodes ahead, of course, on Dragon Ball, and I just got to Popo. Oh, boy. That's not something you want to say on a given day. I got to Popo. Rosalina says, hey, Curtis, I really should be doing important schoolwork, but, glory to Ukraine and all that lark. Yeah, I mean, as I said in the video, I keep trying to run possible scenarios through my mind and think of a way that this ends, do I want to say well, or just in the best possible manner for the Ukraine, or at least ends in a way for the Ukraine to remain a stable and independent country. And I almost hate to say it because you don't want to be all gloom and doom. I just don't see it. And I have nothing but the absolute utmost in admiration for Ukrainian people and the fight that they've put up so far. I mean, I think this has already gone on much, much longer than most all of the world expected it would. And I think it's gone on much longer than Putin thought it might. Reading more about Macron in France, his conversation with Putin today does nothing but cast more of a dark pall over everything that's going on, because what he said from that conversation, none of it sounds in any way encouraging at all. Javon says, this nuclear threat has taken a toll on people's minds, I'm sure. Absolutely. I can't relax anymore. Just thinking the possibility of that is too much to let it sink in. What's a better mindset during this? Javon, I think, for me at least, it sounds oversimplified, but sometimes the only real solution is the simple one. It's not that I don't think about it. It's just that I understand it. I realize it is a possibility. I still think it is a long shot possibility, to be honest with you. But it is a possibility. But I have two choices. I can let it occupy my mind and dampen my days, or I can go about my life trying to enjoy it in every way I can, knowing that there's nothing I can do about it. It's one of those things that's just out of my reach. It's something I can't have any control of. So it's just a mindset. I think that's the only thing you can do, out of altering your mind somehow. But it's just, because I feel you. I know exactly what you're saying. But for me, it's just, I just put a refusal block in my mind to let that dictate how I'm going to live, because something bad might happen. I don't know if that works for everybody. That's what works for me. Technoblaze says, I just imagine the rest of the world keeps glancing our way to make sure we have not put down our beer yet. Well put. Oh, I agree, Roblox. He says Zelensky is a great leader for Ukraine. He knows how to play this game. He has done the absolute best, I believe, one could possibly do in an impossible situation. No, couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. King Elite says you versus Putin. Well, I would happily offer that up. If that'll make him feel like a big man, I will happily go fight Vladimir Putin and his black belt in Taekwondo and Judo and whatever the fuck else he's got that, made his tiny penis feel better. I would fight him in a heartbeat. It would have to be just an agreement that he calms the fuck down, win, lose, or draw. Paramedic says, did you hear about the Brits volunteering to go to Ukraine and fight in the invasion? There's been a number of people from a number of countries that have volunteered to go in. I know there's some Americans as well, all over the world. And it's a testament to them, that they're willing to do it. Krusty says, it's kind of hard to see things in regards to the future during war. I understand that. Trust me, I live in a war zone, so until you're well versed in the textbook of your enemy's tactics, you're not going to be able to. I get that. I completely understand. Again, but that's in answer to the question. That's the only answer I have. Whether or not it's feasible for an individual to do it or not, I don't know. Hold on, I'm going to just check real quick. Just check a couple of quick links. Cool looking lineup. There's my boy that I have newfound respect for, Yajirobe. April 22nd. Ah, cool. Yeah, that's going to be pretty awesome. Like Chrome says, true, it's hard to see the forest from the trees. Absolutely. Sentient Lawn Chair says, I applaud everything the Ukrainian government officials and citizens are doing during what must be the most horrifying moments of their lives. Absolutely. I mean, the Ukrainians deserve, to me, nothing but respect and admiration. It's amazing how really hard-boiled, and you anime fans know what that means, hard-boiled people can get when it's their homes and their way of life that's being threatened. Oh, really? St. Christoph says, I think a few hundred Swedish volunteers went to Ukraine today. I am very much in awe of people who will take it upon themselves to leave comfort and security to go put themselves in harm's way on behalf of others. Finley says, it's honestly quite scary. It makes me anxious, a lot of these threats Putin is making. Sure, and for whatever it's worth, you're not alone. I mean, all the world feels it. And as I said in the video, at least at this point, I think the only way we have of this... now, again, when I say this, I don't mean that nuclear war is inevitable by any means. I don't even think it's likely at this point. But the only way we have out of this where Ukraine is allowed to remain as a sovereign nation is if the Russian people en masse or the higher-ups in the oligarchs and the higher-ups in the Russian military are willing to take Putin down. Outside of that, I think it's just a numbers game that eventually Ukraine will get overwhelmed, and the rest of the world, of course, feels as though, understandably, they can't get involved militarily because they don't want to take a chance on triggering World War III. I mean, Putin is just, he's up there with all the other ultra villain dirtbags in history. He's a dictator psycho trying to impose his will on innocent people in his quest for whatever it is his quest may be. We don't know what that end game is. Nacho says, starting to feel like old man Putin might be feeling like it's other time periods. Could be the start of the typical effects of age affecting his decisions. Well, I've wondered about that too, Nacho. What is he, like 67, 69, something like that? Because as I've said all along, it just seems different. Putin has always been aggressive, but I had always seen him as strategically aggressive. You could see the strategy in his aggressions, and now it's just like balls out. I don't give a fuck what happens to anybody aggression. And the big factor here is, as we pointed out over and over, Putin has made it very clear throughout his reign in Russia that he doesn't give a fuck about his own people. So if he doesn't care about them, if he gets to the point that he doesn't care about himself, what are we left with? Diddley says, careful, Curtis, next stream we will be speaking Russian and drinking vodka. Well, I mean, I don't like to talk, well, I shouldn't say don't like to talk about it, but it's depressing to talk about. But if there were remnants of a nuclear exchange, fuck off train, of course, America would be, I believe, one of the, if not the most difficult nations for anyone to invade because, again, we're armed. We're armed to the teeth as civilians. And we know, we've seen many times through history, an invading force coming into an unknown land against locals who are determined usually doesn't end well for the invading force. Mike says, sorry to change the topic, but I'm going to Disney World for the first time in my life. Where in Magic Kingdom is there good pizza? All of the pizzas in Disney aren't bad. Magic Kingdom doesn't have the best one. I don't know what parks you're going to. Epcot has the best pizza. It would be in Italy. It's a little pizza joint. Name always goes out of my head. In the Italy section, just walk straight to the back of the Italy section. You can't miss it. There, and if you plan on spending any of your evenings or any of your days in the Disney Springs, the downtown Disney area, there's a phenomenal pizza place there, right across the bridge from the hot air balloon. Jill says, I don't know if you know, Curtis, but there's a panic at IKEA stores in Russia, and it's last day before closing. Starting today, I think all IKEA stores in Russia will shut down. See, that, boy, it's such a mixed bag, because you feel for the Russian people, who we know a significant number of want nothing to do with all this, and they're the ones going to be affected most, obviously, by the sanctions. But the other side of that is you hope maybe it'll create enough unrest that regardless of how big a military and police force Putin has, if you could start talking a revolution in the millions, you're talking about a potential regime change. Putin vodka, he will listen. Unfortunately, King Elite, I think maybe he's imbibed in too much of it over the years, and that's done some of the damage. Stormstar says his foreign secretary said the West are the ones worrying about nuclear war, not us. Gee, I wonder why. Right. Whether that's him saying they're not considering that just reminded us it's on the table. I don't know. Who knows what they're everything that comes out of there, you got to figure is some sort of propaganda or some sort of strategery, to use an old SNL word back when they were funny. It's just, you don't know what to believe as far as what they believe. Absolutely, Jared. At this point, I just want this to be over so it doesn't drag out and cause unnecessary death. Sure. That's what we're all rooting for. I do like, I read today, I thought this was pretty cool. A Russian businessman has put a $1 million bounty on Vladimir Putin's head, he wants the military officers to arrest him as a war criminal. Be nice to think he lives in California. He's a dual citizen. But it would be cool if that was enough impetus to get somebody over the top, to get with a few of the pals and say, hey, listen, let's split this and take this asshole out. Christian says, nobody is talking about the how the Ukraine broke an agreement with Russia having NATO troops there. They put NATO troops on their border and Putin warned them. No, they didn't. When did the Ukraine put NATO troops inside the Ukraine at all? No. And that doesn't even make any sense, Christian, because if he's worried about NATO troops at his door, okay, let's say he takes over the Ukraine. Let's say he brings the Ukraine back under Russia's umbrella. It becomes part of Russia. He just added, it's either 3 or 4 NATO nations to his border. So you're saying he was right to do this because he shouldn't have to have NATO troops at his border. And so in response to that, he's going to put more NATO troops at his border. Come on. There is no salient, reasonable reason for what Putin has done. None. There is nothing you can provide that would be a reasonable impetus to go in here and obliterate these people, kill all these civilians, and basically declare war on a sovereign nation. Exactly, Albana. They never did. If he was worried about NATO, then why didn't he do anything when Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, which are all NATO nations? 100% right. Josh says the Ukrainians won't go quietly. They are badasses that are not to be underestimated. Oh, I'm not underestimating them at all. I completely agree with you. I just think the numbers are just too overwhelming against them. Masterman says you have to get into the dictator mindset. The people will always follow the one they fear the most. It all depends on whether they fear the sanctions or Putin's iron fist more. I agree with you, Masterman. And again, I'm going to put this disclaimer in every time I talk about that, about the Russian people rising up against them. Listen, that's not something I say flippantly. I understand the risk. I understand 100% why they would be reticent to do it. Again, you might not just be facing prison. You could easily be facing death. Or worse, or some forms of torture or something. No, I completely get it. It still has to be, as this is a situation with limited opportunities for a peaceful resolution, it still has to be kind of what we root for. Flame Enforcer says maybe he'll wait for a president to remove the U.S. from NATO. I don't think that would really help Putin's interest anyway. And I will say that after this now, though, even say Trump were to win in 2024, I think his idea of now of pulling the U.S. out of NATO would be dead in the water, even with other Republicans. I would certainly hope it would be. CC Gaming says, Curtis, doesn't this almost feel like Putin is setting the Ukrainian people to then give them a false sense of security, then he just send the rest or bomb them? Well, I think more than that, CC Gaming, I think it's similar. I have a similar belief. I just think he didn't realize he was going to have to go as deeply into his arsenal as he's going to have to defeat the Ukrainian people. That's what I think. And that's what I fear is coming now, is he's going to pull out everything short of nukes. And just because, again, typically speaking, the bigger the weapon, the less precise. And so we've already seen where he's basically saying, screw it, I don't care if I kill civilians. And I think that attitude about civilian death is just going to become more and more to the forefront. Philip says, the bounty on Putin actually reminds me of American Jewish businessman at the start of World War II that put a bounty on Hitler. Oh, I didn't know that. The U.S. then neutral made him rescind the bounty? Really? I was not aware of that, Philip. That's an interesting and disturbing tidbit. I didn't know that. Hi, Dragon. Dragon of Hatred says, bro, I worry for my girl and her kids. All of them are Russian with full-on Russian names. If this escalates, then is racism going to be bad for them? I hope not, Dragon of Hatred. That's why you guys have seen just the same thing with the coronavirus. At least here, at least when we're streaming or making videos here, I try and go out of my way. It's something that shouldn't need to be said, and it's sad that it does. That everybody needs to remember. These Russian actions, there's no reason to take any action against Russian people because of the actions of the Russian government. Nobody is victimized more by the Russian government than the Russian people. Same with China. It was Chinese government that allowed a pandemic to run through the world. It's the Russian government, specifically Vladimir Putin, that is invading another country. If you take any type of punitive action against someone because they're Russian, you're taking an action against the people who were affected likely even more than you were by that initial action. It's stupid. Don't be dumb. Anybody out there, don't be dumb. Ranger Scorpio says Putin is using thermobaric weapons against civilians. I read that people were reporting that. You're not supposed to use those against soldiers. It's against the Geneva Convention, and they denied it until Ukraine captured one that was empty. Oh, really? I didn't hear about that. Ukraine did capture one? Yeah, I had heard that's what was being alleged. He doesn't give a fuck. He just doesn't care. Yeah, it's stupid and crazy. It is. It's ridiculous. Again, to lash out at Russian people, to lash out at Chinese people because of the acts of their government, when these are governments of the world that victimize their own people much more than they've ever victimized any of us over here. Fireshot Studio says, while we always knew there would be some insurgency resistance from civilians in the majority Ukrainian west of the nation, the bombing of cities has driven even ethnic Russians against the invasion. I would think so, yeah. You would certainly think so, Studios. And you feel, again, for these kids that were sent over there under entirely false pretenses. Either it was a training mission or that they were going over as liberators and the people in the Ukraine would greet them with flowers and hugs. And now these poor kids get over there and it's entirely something different. And they're just being sent over there to kill innocents. SCP says, I hung out with foreign exchange students from Ukraine, and they said much of the country has a deep hatred of Russia from the Soviet era. That's understandable. If Russia wins, they'd be dealing with insurgents for years. That's what I think too, SCP. That's where I've been. Just seeing their resolve now, as you said, this is not something the Ukrainian people, if they are overtaken, are just going to sit back and accept. I don't believe it for a moment. AZN says Ukrainians got to stop Putin. If he takes, I can never pronounce that. I've heard it pronounced. I keep messing up. Mariupol in the south. He can connect Crimea to Donbas overland. Imagining Zelensky like Fett in Kyiv streets. Yeah, AZN. You root for it. I'm hoping for it. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I just think he's going to overwhelm them with sheer numbers as far as weaponry. Roblox says, how do you feel about Turkey attempting to restrict Russian Navy's movement in the Black Sea? I can't comment, Roblox. I didn't hear about that. I didn't catch that, so I can't say. I don't know. I'd need all the details. I'd comment on it, but restrict it how and exactly where, I don't know, because I haven't read up on that yet. I haven't seen that yet. There's so much information coming out all the time. Vin says, I was talking to my wife about this last night, and we thought he might have a brain tumor. That can definitely make someone make rash decisions like this. A lot of people, Vin, have been offering that maybe he's got, some sort of fatal disease or a serious disease, a cancer or something like that, and that's why his I just don't give a shit attitude has taken over. It's entirely possible. Could be too just that he's getting older, and we know he's always wanted to restore the glory of the Soviet Union, of the USSR, and he's decided this is where he does it. Chrome says he was expecting the Ukrainian president to flee at the first sign of tanks and for them to be demoralized and roll over. I think you're right, Chrome. That's what annoyed him. A small country successfully fighting back. Completely agree. And as I had said before, I think he, just knowing his ego, knowing the type of person he presents himself to be, it's got to be just torture to him that Zelensky is seen as this international badass. That's what Putin has always wanted to be seen as, and instead he's created one. He's created somebody who will always be seen, no matter how this ends up. Zelensky is always going to have the legacy of the tough guy, and Putin is not. And that's got to be killing him. Philip says, later, when the U.S. joined the war, they made a propaganda movie about some gangsters that take the businessman up on his offer. It was a comedy where Hitler's troops execute a mustacheless Hitler. Jeez. See, I didn't even know anything about that story. That's interesting. Link to the movie. Chrome says, good thing it looks like Pickle and Gohan will be relevant again. They're the focus of the film, and they're teasing something big I won't spoil. Interesting. I still got to catch up on the last one. Fireshot Studio says, I forgot who, but one of the Russian diplomats accidentally called it a war, and when one of the journalists called him out on it, he stumbled over his words so hard trying to take it back. Yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he doesn't want the fallout from having misspoke. I have my friend again in Russian. I it's hard for me to come up with a name to identify someone. I'll call you B because that's in your icon pick. B says, I am from Russia. Pirate says nuclear war inevitable. No, I don't agree with that. Probably 20% of population lost, another 10% for years to come because of radiation. Won't be the end of the world. No, I don't think nuclear war is inevitable. I don't even think it's likely at this point. I think there is certainly a higher degree of possibility for nuclear war, significantly higher today than there was just a month ago. But no, I wouldn't call it likely at this point. Tyler says, I don't like that Russia is attacking civilians, but Ukraine armed a lot of their civilians, so that gave Russia a good out for doing so. Yeah, yes and no, Tyler. In the rules of engagement and everything, it'd be one thing if you're talking about people in the streets with guns and soldiers shooting at them. But when you're talking about, as far as, again, rules of engagement in the Geneva Convention, when you're talking about citizens being armed to protect against invaders and you just start lobbing bombs into residential districts, nah, it's not exactly this, it's not exactly cause or just cause, but Putin doesn't care anyway. He's going to do whatever he wants. Stormstar says the UK will be first. We're not US, we're not EU. Thanks, Brexiteers. We're the small, loudmouth middleman. We'd be the perfect message. I don't think so, Storm. I don't think that if it came to nukes, I don't think Putin could afford to be that specific about it. I don't think it's a case of, okay, let's just go get England, because the response, okay, you launch a nuke into England. If the UN has any brains at all, and again, I'm not purporting World War III. It's just, let's see what the moment dictates. You would have to, as the UN, respond with a massive nuclear strike throughout Russia. You would have no choice. Again, if a nuke gets tossed over into the UK, we can't sit back there. We can't worry about a proportional response. You have to do everything you can to obliterate them as quickly as possible at that point, because that's where it's all headed. There's not going to be a you throw a nuke, I throw a nuke exchange, and then it ends there. It's just not going to happen. That crazy king says, I'm worried what will happen if Putin gets backed into a corner like a scared pup. Agree. I assume he'll lash out and take everyone with him if that happens. That's why, as I've said, obviously, I know a lot of people are saying, the West and the UN should be opposing him militarily. And no, that's not necessarily a good idea because of the prospect of World War III. The best situational outcome for all this is, again, the en masse rising up of the Russian people, or more specifically, the rising up of those in power just below Putin, his inner circle, the oligarchs, so on and so forth, that'll take him out. That's the best way out of this. And we don't even know. We know there are a lot of people in Russia because, we see video of the protests and everything. And are they up to like 8,000 people have been arrested already? So we know there's a lot of people in Russia against what he's doing. But we also know Russia propagandizes their people as much as possible. So do we have, I know we've seen a couple, B was in here. I don't know if I've seen any of our other Russian folks in here. It'd be curious to see what people who live in Russia feel the percentage breakdown is. How many people are supporting Putin and how many people are against the war? That I'd love to hear it. Again, I haven't seen a lot of our Russian gang in here, but if any of you are, let us know your take on that. Philip says, so this is something I heard, don't know if it's true, but apparently the Ukrainians threaten to execute any Russian artillerymen they come across, while a war crime would be a good deterrent. Yeah, well, and that's true, Philip, too. As you alluded to, it's a war crime, but war crimes are being committed left and right by the other side, so where does that leave you? In a real war, the UN would be the UN, still pointless, but each individual country would rise up against Russia and probably form back into their old blocks. I think, Chrome, again, if we're talking a nuclear strike, I think then the UN would have to be united. And I think it would be. And I think, again, you would and it's not something I root for. I don't want to put that, I don't want anybody to take it in that event. I'm just talking about what I think would happen. I think you have to go in and obliterate them then, because you cannot operate. If somebody's willing to send a nuke into a NATO country, you cannot operate under the perception that they can be stopped at anything but obliteration, because it's very unlikely. If you sent one nuke out, we're going to believe that that's going to be the end of it. It just isn't. Willie says the UK has been one of the state's greatest allies for 100 years. Truth. If Putin attacked, we would step in, and the mere possibility of us going in to fight Russia kept Putin at bay for a while. No, right. And again, it doesn't have to be, right, it doesn't have to be nuclear. If Putin made a move on any of the NATO countries militarily, then I believe, and as you guys said, yes, the UN is not always a perfect organization by any stretch, but if the UN at that point doesn't go in and respond militarily, then there was never any use in having the UN to begin with. Max says if Putin went as far as to attack countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Poland, or the Baltic states, it would end up as a major conflict, and Putin threatened Finland. I agree, Max. And unfortunately, at that point, it would have to be a major conflict. We being the West, U.S., the UN, or I'm sorry, NATO, we would have no other alternative. You can't let that go. It just, as much as nobody has an appetite for World War III, you can't allow that to happen. C2D says Russia is planning martial law on the 4th, according to Ukraine. So if that is true, the public opinion is definitely against the Kremlin. I had heard something about, I didn't hear a date, C2, but I had heard that there was martial law. Yeah, that's a good point. If they're honestly declaring martial law, that would indicate that there is a huge amount of backlash against the war. Who knows how that might play out, especially if, again, Putin can't stop all information from getting into Russia, obviously. If enough Russian people start to feel as just the rest of us are feeling, if enough Russian people start thinking, holy shit, this guy's going to start a nuclear war and nukes are coming at us, there's no telling what might inspire people to rise up then, or if that's enough to get a huge amount of people to rise up. Chrome says, well, when has the UN ever successfully done anything? I'm saying they'll sit there and bicker while the countries who make up the UN will respond without waiting for their decision. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I shouldn't, and I was misspeaking earlier, Chrome. Anyway, I think I said UN once when I meant NATO. Yeah. No, I agree. The UN, I won't say the UN is worthless, but it doesn't have any real teeth. Vaughn says, now Japan wants nukes. It's going to be hell in the next decade if world fails to resolve this issue correctly. You can't blame Japan, Vaughn. You really can't. I mean, they signed the treaty with us after the World War, that we would provide them protection so they wouldn't arm. But I think certainly enough time has passed and the geopolitics of the world have changed enough that Japan should have every right, especially with North Korea sitting right there and Russia sitting right over there. They should have every right to have nukes. I agree. I believe. Oh, okay. Here we go. KO2, the utility robot, good name, is Russian. As of today, they blocked a lot of neutral or independent radio news stations. Oh boy, it sounds like things are. Yeah, sounds like Putin doesn't like the way things are going in the streets. Now, robot, what would you say? Just as a Russian, what would you say the breakdown is roughly in Russia as far as percentage of people that are supporting Putin versus percentage of people that want him to back off the war? I'm just be curious to hear what you think, what your general feeling is. Florencio says, Putin keeps saying the Ukraine is full of Nazis. Well, there is a neo-Nazi element, unfortunately, in a couple of the regions in the Ukraine. But that's the tool he used as some propaganda to be able to do what he wants to do, which is take the country. He didn't go into those regions and try and get rid of the neo-Nazis. He invaded the entire nation. Yeah. Again, you can't trust absolutely anything he says as any sort of truth. Hey, good to see you again, Tristan. We're doing good. Minato says the UN has basically proven to be as effective as the League of Nations. Yeah, it's unfortunate. There's no teeth to the UN at all. Okay, so now Robot again is a Russian citizen. Says it's getting close to 50-50 with massive loss of money and closing of business companies. You lost your job recently too because of it. See, that's what you gotta wonder. And it does. It sucks for people just like our Robot here. Because there's got to be a hugely, obviously, significant number of people in Russia who want nothing to do with this. And they're the ones that get affected most by the sanctions. It sucks. But there's not, the only other options are either to confront Russia militarily, meaning the rest of the world, or to impose those sanctions. So that's why I say to even think about lashing out at anybody you know or anybody you encounter that's Russian because of this is asinine. It's the Russian people who are being decimated by it as much as anyone else outside of Ukrainians. Stormstar says, today Lukoil, one of Russia's largest oil firms, publicly called for an end to the war. I thought that was, they're huge. Oh, I didn't know that, Stormstar. Did they really? Yeah, I know people have been requesting boycotts because there's a lot of Lukoil gas stations and such here in the States. I didn't hear that. Yeah, that is big. I don't see, and I know what people will say, well, Putin doesn't care. No, you're right, he doesn't care. But we're talking about that's big because that speaks to the Russian people. And you hope at some level, because we have no way of knowing what's going on there, all of this is getting to the oligarchs and the upper echelon of the Russian military. That's what you hope for. C2 says an economist has already stated the next Russian generation are going to grow up in poverty. Yeah, well, certainly it would seem, if this doesn't come to a resolution soon, that's a certainty. I mean, if the whole world could get lucky and somebody puts a bullet in Putin's head tonight and cooler heads prevail and take over, then maybe they've got a chance. But outside of that, Chrome says there's an American streamer named CRP who's in Ukraine now. He got kicked out of his hotel for Putin propaganda. Apparently, he's live streaming about Bitcoin assassins sent after him now. Oh, jeez. Max says, well, after WW2, the USSR forced communism into Eastern Europe. Now, given the fact that the countries I previously mentioned are NATO's Eastern Front, Putin should be extremely careful. Yeah. And again, that's why I say the whole thing, which was brought up earlier, about, well, Putin felt that that was NATO basically at his doorstep with the way the Ukraine was moving. So take over the Ukraine, make it part of Russia, and then you absolutely, without a doubt, have NATO nations at your doorstep. Again, nothing he has said to justify this holds up to the light of any type of real inspection. Ranger says a Russian unit is trying to lie and say they were never in Ukraine after soldiers of their unit surrendered to Ukraine soldiers saying they abandoned us after the unit suffered casualties and famine. Well, I saw, I don't know how many of you saw, oh, I should have looked for it again and I could have pulled it up for you guys. There's that really heart-wrenching video of a Russian soldier in the Ukraine who had surrendered. And Ukrainian people they gave him some food and some tea, and one of the women had FaceTimed his mom. And you see this poor kid, I mean, he's eating that food ravenously. You know he had to be starving just from the way he's attacking the food and looking at the phone, and his mom comes on and he starts to cry. It tells you a lot. Yes, there's $1 million bounty on Putin's head, Fluffy. I was reading it earlier. It's the Russian businessman who now lives in California. I'm sure I'm gonna massacre his name, but it's Alex Konenkin. He wants the military officers to arrest Putin as a war criminal, and he says what I like is he said he was putting up the bounty to facilitate the denazification of Russia, which is a perfect jab back at Putin and his stated reasons for going into the Ukraine. Rosa says, I'm going to become a bounty hunter. Putin's got a one-piece bounty now. He does, Flame Enforcer. You hope, hey, every little thing, you hope that could be the moment, the incident, the for lack of a better term, the trigger that gets somebody to take care of business on him. I have no doubt that if those in the Russian military would stand up and take Putin down, I have no doubt this guy would give him the $1 million. I'll bet you if they were to stand up and take him down, I'll bet you could get, hell, listen, I'll put that out there right now. Hopefully this is getting through to some of the Russian people. I'll say it right now. If somebody will stand up and shoot that fucker, I will start the GoFundMe on your behalf. And I'll bet you that'd be the biggest GoFundMe in the history of the internet. And it won't even be close. Andrew says, can we donate to increase that bounty? Allegedly. Andrew says, that's what I mean. Whoever was willing to step up and do it, take him out. I think as a group, as a world, we could get together and make sure that person's very comfortable. Albana says there's a meme going around that says all Ukrainian signs have been replaced to the Hague, where the International Criminal Court is. Well, that's well played. Chrome says statement from CRP on his stream against Zelensky. His regime is evil. He is a pig. The Russian invasion is justified. What Putin did this week is an invasion. Is it wrong? It depends. No, it doesn't depend on anything. It's wrong. It's wrong 100%. And again, there are two reasons to believe it's not wrong. You're a Russian troll, Russian bot, or you're an idiot. Yeah, Albert says if we each gave him $1, he'd be a billionaire. Oh, it like again, there would be no shortage of support for worldwide support in any way, monetarily, especially for someone who is willing to take him out at this point. No, I was never in the military. Recall. I'm sorry. Is it recall? I have utmost respect for those who were. I looked into it at one point back when I was boxing. The Marines had a really good boxing team, and I was in between jobs. And I got thinking about it. It's like, hey, I'll look into maybe joining the Marines and get on the boxing team. And I went down to a recruiter, and I was surprised. I don't know if this is still the case, but when I was young, I had my eardrum surgically punctured because when I was young, medicine had advanced barely out of the Stone Ages, and that's how they handled certain issues with your ears that now they take care of with a simple procedure. But because of those punctured eardrums, I couldn't join. As it turns out, as far as boxing, that worked out well for me because I wasn't a good enough boxer to make the to make the Marine team. So I'd have just been shoveling, mule shit somewhere. Rosa says, my grandpa on my mom's side was in the military. Reminder that I'm Venezuelan. Fuck my grandpa. Philip says, honestly, it makes sense there'd be a neo-Nazi movement in the Ukraine. Back in World War II, the Nazis were welcomed as liberators from the Soviets. Ukrainians provided a large manpower pool to the Third Reich. Yeah, as I've said to others, we had some people trying to defend what Putin was doing. There's going to be a significant amount of societal fallout when you have a nation that is part of another nation, as Ukraine was part of the USSR, and that relationship is broken up. But none of that justifies going in to then dominate and take over that relatively newly formed sovereign nation. Well, thank you, Treetop. I appreciate that. Chrome says he's an idiot. Full YouTube name is Coach Red Pill. Oh, he's an artist and part of the anti-SJW circle. He's the type to sniff his own farts. He disappeared in Ukraine for a while, thought he was dead. Yeah, I'd never heard of him. Stormstar says, even if Putin was found out to be a war criminal, unless he's forcibly ousted by his own people, I don't see what difference will it make. Well, that's what this businessman who put up the bounty is saying. That's the basis on which he wants them to take Putin out of power, the military, the military leaders, to charge him with war crimes and remove him from power. That part of YouTube, more Putin, more like shitting. Willie, that's terrible. Willie just wrote, this just in, Germany invades Poland just out of habit. Stop. Let's see. Bobby says, America and American-dominated NATO must not have tried to include Ukraine as a member because it would have been a great national security threat for Russia. Well, as far as, Bobby, Ukraine had said on many occasions that they were looking at NATO membership. But even so, again, it still doesn't make any sense that Putin is so threatened by that. He already has NATO members on his border. And again, if he takes over the Ukraine and makes it part of Russia, he's got even more NATO members on his border. So none of that makes sense as a reason for invading the country. C2 says that assassination GoFundMe would get so much. It's like the Scottish guy who now never has to pay for a beer after he broke his foot kicking a flaming terrorist in the balls. Yeah, you're right. It would obviously be the all-time record-setting GoFundMe or any type of central funding ever. Scorpio says Putin will never be charged. He has too much money and money talks. He will flee the country and disappear before anything. Probably already has an evac ready to go now. That's possible. That's fine too. As long as he gets the fuck out, that's fine too. Yes, Krusty, I didn't know that till recently, believe it or not. He said, didn't Russia want to be part of NATO at some point? I was reading up on that, and yes, several times in their past. Albert says, as someone from Lebanon, I know a bit about wars. It really is tragic what these poor people are going through. I'm sure you do, Albert. I'm sure you do, yeah. It's sad. Kaiser says, apparently the Allies contemplated whether to use nukes if they could destroy the atmosphere. At that point, rule from Hitler would be preferable. Oof. Yeah. Chrome says, not surprised you don't know him. She's talking about that streamer. I only really know about him from the time he was on stream with Metokur and claimed Metokur videos aren't artsy enough now. Metokur told him to stop riding his dick. Stormstar says, I just don't see why he fears NATO anyway. He's the one who is threatening it all the time, so what difference would it make to him? Truth. And the thing that gets me too is, you're going in preemptively because you're afraid Ukraine is thinking about NATO membership. Now, I'll give you this. If Ukraine became a NATO member, and because of that, NATO moved nukes into the Ukraine, he would have a legitimate beef. That's no different than when Russia put nukes in Cuba. He would. But I don't think that ever would have happened. First of all, it's not even necessary. It's not even necessary. There's no doubt, excuse me, that NATO nations, America specifically, can deliver nukes into Russia. They don't need to put them next door. We know we can. So none of it makes any sense. Adrian says, man, Putin's got billions. Why didn't he just leave office and go swim with the pigs? Dude looks stressed. He loves the power, but you can tell he's fed up. But he'd rather stay than give up. See, you make a good point, Adrian. I mean, he could. You're right. It's got to be all about power, all about that megalomania, and all about that restoring the glory of the USSR, because there's a lot of people in the know in such things that believe Putin is the richest man in the world. He could easily just back away and live the life forever. And I'm hoping that the fact that the oligarchs in Russia who do enjoy living that life and now cannot, because for one thing, you can't fly anywhere basically out of Russia anymore, and who knows how long that sanction will last. Could be a very long time. That's why you hope the oligarchs who do want to enjoy being rich get fed up with Putin. Let's see. Anton says, since he threatens with nukes all the time, makes me feel like they don't even work at this point. Otherwise, I mention it all the time. Yeah, that's the tough part, Anton. It could very well be, all this talk about nukes could very well be bluster. But it's strategic, and he knows it. He knows that the world needs to respect the fact that he might not be bluffing. He could even be showing us this insane side of himself as strategy in and of itself. Thinking, they're going to believe I'm crazy enough to do it. Who knows with this fucking guy? Garen says, any thoughts on the German chancellor calling their national strategy so far as naive and pledging to massively increase their military budget? I hadn't heard that. I don't... a lot of Europe is certainly very dependent on the U.S. militarily if push were to come to shove. So I certainly understand that feeling somewhat. Bobby says, no, 2 of the NATO nations have very negligible boundary touching with Russia, but Ukraine has a 3,000 kilometer long border touching with Russia. Vladimir Putin was left with no other option. No, disagreed. I think it's more than, I'd have to look at the map again. I think it's more than 2, but okay. Excuse me. As I say, so he takes Ukraine, and that becomes part of Russia. You're adding 3 or 4 more nations to your border. And it doesn't matter how big they are. If your fear is having nukes at your doorstep, excuse me, sorry guys. You don't need a lot of territory for that. So he's not going to solve that problem in any way, shape, or form by taking the Ukraine. He just isn't. He's just going to have his border with more NATO nations. And to say that a very negligible boundary, I would disagree. If his stated concerns in the past have been that they're going to end up putting nukes there, doesn't matter how big the border is. It just means you got nukes put right on your border. Doesn't matter how big the nation is, I meant to say. Here we go. There's always some dimwit with this. How can you justify America's invasion of Libya, Iraq, and Syria and their genocide? Who the fuck is talking about any of them? Who is trying to justify anything America's done? The conversation is specifically about the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, and this is where everybody goes with it. Those are separate topics we could certainly talk about. And who said I want to justify all of them? That's just pulling something completely out of your ass that has nothing to do with the conversation at hand. Every time it's like, what the fuck? Roblox says Russia's trying to conquer the ex-Warsaw Pact non-NATO nations in order to use them as curtain against the West, just like Cold War, because Putin's spirit is still at Cold War era. Well, certainly that last part I believe is absolutely true. Yeah, but again, I don't think he really accomplishes that curtain effectively at all by taking the Ukraine. Rosa says, okay, now I want to troll, though. They're black, not white. It's justified their genocide. Yeah, that's where you're right, Rosa. That's where that conversation always goes. It has nothing to do with what's going on here. Nothing whatsoever. It's not even, it's just, it's like having this conversation that we're having now and saying, why is the baseball season going to be delayed? How come they can't come together? It has nothing to do with it. Rosa says, fun fact, Ukraine means borderland. Oh, I didn't know that. The name comes from the fact it was the natural border between Russia and what was considered to be Europe back then. That is why we say the Ukraine. Really? I did not know that, Rosa. That's interesting. I didn't know that at all. Blue Spirit says, we fear that he may return to invade Georgia, too. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the concern here goes beyond Ukraine and into what's next. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Anton says, you hear the Russian jets in Swedish airspace? I did hear about that. Obviously just an empty threat, but damn, those jets would get wrecked by the new JAS Gripen E. The only thing there is, unfortunately, from what I understand, that's not even that uncommon for Russia to push those boundaries. And this is a really bad time to do it, but yeah, they play shit like that a lot, apparently. It's less an issue if they work or not. Oh, I don't know. I lost track, Chrome. I apologize. I lost track about what you're referring to. Gonzalez says, so your point is that those interventions from the USA are wrong and what Russia is doing is wrong. I can agree with that. You mentioned a bunch of interventions. We'd have to take them individually, but this isn't the forum for it. That's not what we're talking about. Some of them, yes, I agreed were wrong. My stance on things is I think America should be involved militarily only in places where you can make a direct and real correlation to the safety of us and our allies. Outside of that, I don't believe we should be involved. Blue Spirit says, if anyone wishes to know more, you can watch a movie named Something About Georgia. It's on YouTube. That's interesting. Oh, the nuclear launch systems. Okay, Chrome. Yeah. There's a lot of things to wonder, especially when we see what kind of shape, and we've seen it in pictures and video. The Russian military doesn't look like it's in really good shape. A lot of that equipment looked beat to shit. And certainly the strategy in this initial invasion was pretty poor too. So yeah, you gotta wonder a lot of things about their nuclear armaments. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna have to pack it up for today. Thank you guys so much for this conversation. It's fascinating as always. We'll be talking about this a lot in the future. We're going to be doing lots of topical stuff overall. And but don't forget, tomorrow now we take a break from the topical for at least one stream, because tomorrow's Free for All Friday. We have a lot of newer people here. Free for All Friday is a live stream where we just go in and have fun. It's silly. It's over the top. The jokes are ridiculous. Everything about it's just a good time. If you got time, you want to come in and hang out for that type of thing, feel free to, because it's entirely different. It's entirely different from this. It's just all about having a really weird good time, and you can talk about anything you want. But as far as this goes, this was really, as always, really informational. I appreciate everybody and what everybody brings to the conversation. I learn a lot from this, and I think if nothing else, it helps us all when we're all stressed out as we are about all this to have a place to go and at least talk about it a little. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. And again, tomorrow's Free for All Friday, and I will see you all there.